Welcome back, everybody, to the Nirvana stage. Welcome here. Welcome to the Build Stuff. If you just joined the stage, we have some amazing speakers and presentations here. But before I present this next speaker, I just want to remind you that we have a fun stage where you can decode your personality, where there's a coaching session, office yoga, and you can even get your caricature done there. Also, don't forget to try virtual coffee. I heard it's really, really tasty. Now, don't forget to visit our virtual booths because you can win some amazing stuff there. For example, PlayStation 5, Apple Watch 6. You can get discount to learn magic online and even win noise canceling headphones. But now let's start with a presentation, and the name of that presentation is Logging as a Painkiller. The presenter's name is Anton Kazakov, and here's what we know about him. He has been a software engineer for 22 years, and he has been getting money for it for about 17 years. And he has a passion for perfection. He's a big perfectionist. He can read a good code as a book before going to sleep. And if it's not readable as a book, then he will spend hours and hours make it readable as a book, and then he will read it and go to bed. So Anton, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. You got me there. Yes, I'm a big perfectionist, but that's not the topic of today's presentation. Yeah, today in the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk about logging and how to make it your painkiller. So first thing first, just a few words about me. My name is Anton. As you already know, I work as an engineering manager at Westwing Home and Living. We sell beautiful home and living stuff. We also have a very nice tech department where we're hiring, but no more information about this from this point. Go check it out yourself if you're interested. Here's my Twitter handle and my email address. Please write me an email if you have a topic to discuss. Cool. Then back to logging. I'd like to start my presentation and my talk with as simple a thing as a definition. What is logging? Very often, the non-native speakers, like I am, actually keep being totally unaware of the existence of some certain software engineering terms in the real world, and logging is not an exception there. So some years ago, something clicked in my head, and like, okay, logging, does it have to do with logs, with these pieces of wood? And of course it does. Yeah, it's a process of cutting, processing, moving them. Yeah, but this is not the definition that we're looking for. Let's take a look at more kind of software engineering-wise definition. So it was not very easy to find it, surprisingly. Such an essential thing, let's say, for software engineering. But yeah, the University of California in San Diego, some time ago, published a paper about some best practices in the open source software engineering. So yeah, and there they mentioned logging as a practice to record the dynamic information during a program's execution. Very well, let's go with this so far. Now, why painkiller? Although this may seem a bit clearer than the definition, then I would like just to start with the best example for this that I have from my personal experience. We all know these stories, but let me tell you one of mine. It happened several years ago. Our marketing at that time came up with a beautiful promoted page with a curated product feed, super nicely done. A lot of promotion activities were planned. We rolled it out. We sent a lot of traffic to it. And guess what happened? 10 minutes in, it's not working. But there was a bit more of a complication there. It was not working for some users in some cases. And this some kind of made it really hard to understand. Yeah, we asked marketing to maybe stop the promotion. They said it wasn't possible, so go figure out what happened, fix it, please. Well, all right. We went looking for the reasons for this issue, and the first question, right, that we should ask is what's in the log file? Well, we went to the log file, to the location of the log file on the server, one of the live servers, and it was saying a call to the service X failed. So we were running microservices, a modern architectural pattern, very well. But yeah, so this log actually didn't tell us much except the service X. So we were like, okay, what's in the log file of the service X? But there was a problem because wait, where is the log file of the service X? That was one of these services, like application components that are running there on the background and no one knows about them till they break. So that is why we're like, okay, where is the service X deployed? Where is the log file? So we found the server where it was. We found how to SSH into it. And guess what? We did not find the log file. So it just wasn't where we expected it to be. Okay, we went with a few more guesses, all unsuccessful. We went looking for the framework of the service X, and we found what the code, what the framework was that it was built with, and we found the logs in its default folder. You know, sometimes I come from the PHP background, so in most of the frameworks there is some sort of a runtime folder where everything gets generated by default, and this is where it was. So okay, fine. So what's in the log? Guess what? It's too big to properly browse through, and it was really hard to find the exact event. With some power grabs and everything, we were able to do that. Finally, we found it, and what does it say? An error has occurred, and nothing else. Well, not very helpful, is it? We thought exactly like that. We were very frustrated. Our marketing people were also very frustrated. Everyone was very frustrated. We continued fixing it. We got lucky because one person from marketing was able actually to reproduce it on their machine. We found out that that was due to some particular kinds of products in the cart and so on and so forth. So a very typical distributed system issue. But by the time we fixed it, we had lost a lot. First and foremost, we lost energy. Sorry, a lot of energy. Just because it took us time, it took us a lot of effort, and you know how much energy you get to spend when there are some people behind your back standing, applying pressure on you, and so on and so forth. We obviously lost money as well, because the promotion activities were running all that time, and some of the users, a significant part, and like one of the best parts of the users who had already some stuff in the cart, so they were very close to buying stuff, they actually could not. So we did lose money. But these two things are more or less recoverable, unless you spend really too much of that. So one thing that we lost that had a long-lasting effect was actually confidence. So we were no more sure that we can easily deploy stuff and actually, in case of an issue, fix it also easily. Moreover, we lost trust of our marketing people and all business people actually in us, and they started coming up with suggestions like, okay, can we arrange a testing session to check everything before a rollout? We started spending actual time of more people than needed to test our things so that they are also sure that we are not going to roll out something that will ruin their promotion and so on. Right, so a pretty bad situation, isn't it? How to fix that? Well, I suggest we leave aside the, let's say, the part where we should have tested stuff better, because this is a topic for a whole new presentation. Clearly, we cannot test everything. It is simply impossible, especially with the systems that get more and more complex at birth already nowadays. So we have to be able to mitigate issues should they happen. And here, the clear problem was the logs. They were not very helpful, and they were supposed to be our first step the most important step in this investigation of why the issue had happened. So, as you can imagine, throughout my software engineering career, that was not the only issue of that kind. I had several of them, and throughout this relatively painful experience, I was able to come up with 3 checklists for the logs that I'm now checking the logging module, the logging part of the applications I'm working with against. And let's go over these checklists. The first one will tell us, are my logs okay? So the logs that you are already creating in your applications. And the answer is yes, if they are configured, first of all. Why so? To obvious a point, you would say, but not once have I seen the logs that were not configured and that were left just by default, just in that, like in that service X. So yes, there has to be a conscious effort to put the logs where they belong, to configure the format, to configure the verbosity, and so on and so forth. Now, they should be easily reachable, right? Because if they are not easily reachable, then it will take some additional time to even open them, to get to them. Moreover, all of them that you have should be easily reachable, because in the distributed systems that many of us, I'm sure, are running, every component can be contributing to the issue you're having at the moment. That is why it makes sense to get to all of them in one click. That's the best case. Okay, besides that, they need to be easily discoverable. That means that, okay, when your logs are consolidated in some one place, you need to really be able to quickly get to the part of the logs you're interested in, because probably they are in some buckets, in some groups or sections there, and they need to be named in a proper way so that you understand, this is for that part of the system, this is for that one. And of course, every single one of them should be like that. Now, they should be searchable. Searchable meaning, in the best case, you should be able to search by keyword, by log level, and by time frame rather easily. And that is, to say the least. Actually, the more filters you can apply, the more types of filters, the better. But we're rarely, so that's because we are rarely interested in all of the logs that we have. We usually want to see a very narrow time frame, a very particular log level, namely errors in case of some urgent stuff, right? And then also search by keyword, because we know that our log messages say something specific. Now, they should be readable. That not only that means some standardized format or structure, but also properly assigned log levels. Because, for instance, if, and that sometimes happens quite often from my experience, if everything lands in the logs with a log level error, then you don't see the actual errors in case there's an issue caused by some error in the code. And the actual errors are just hiding behind the, in the pile of all the logs that you have, and that is definitely not helping you in case of an issue. Moreover, there are even examples that I've seen of log messages being very long lines of JSON, and it wasn't formatted, and it was spanning over, I don't know, 20, 30 lines, which is completely not readable. Any JSON object written like this is the same, at least to my eyes. I'm I can really not distinguish between them. So yeah, readability is very important. And the last here, but not the least, they should be informative. So no messages like an error occurred that is like a catch-all messages, whatever happened in the code, right? Because that is not helpful. And yeah, it actually costs not so much effort to add a proper message in the log that would say, okay, the code has failed to process this kind of entity with this ID and failed to do this particular action. And then, of course, it makes sense to put some context to it. Meaning, for instance, in case of an error as a backtrace, or some other attributes like the URL of the page, some ID of the user that has tried to perform an action, and such things. So it should be informative. Otherwise, this log is not helpful. Good. So that's the first checklist. And I suggest that we quickly get back to our definition. So it was a practice to record the dynamic information during a program's execution. Let's enhance it a little bit and incorporate everything from the first checklist. So let logging be a practice to capture the detailed information about the program's execution and store it in a readable, queryable, easily reachable, and discoverable way. So with that definition in mind, when we say logging, we mean that exactly. Let's go on. So the second checklist would show us, am I logging what I should? And should here means that in our systems, there are kinds of logs, kinds of events that are happening no matter what. And they are producing logs also by default, and we should definitely be taking care of those logs being properly placed, properly formatted, and so on and so forth. So adhere to the first checklist, basically. And what you should log is, first of all, execution errors. That's, again, very obvious. Of course, every application would log execution errors. However, it very often happens that some of the execution errors just are somehow left unattended, and that they somehow disappear from the logs silently and so on. So that should not happen, and we should be really checking that every single component that can produce an execution error would log something in that case. The code, the database, any other store, anything. Now, as an example of the execution errors that are very often just left aside, I would suggest front-end errors. I even put it as a separate point because this is probably one of the trickiest ones. So many people actually just forget about them because where can you see front-end errors? In the browser console. And that is already too late to see this error in the browser console if it's already live, because how do you get the information about this error happening then? From your customers? That's way too late, right? And for instance, you don't want to be unaware in case your payment page isn't working, then it's a catastrophe, isn't it? But if it's just the front end of the payment page that is not working, yeah, there's no way you find it unless you log it to the logs of to the entire to the very same logging storage that you have for everything else. Now it can be a bit tricky though. So normally, how you would do, you would capture errors happening on the front end of your page, and then just send them back to the backend endpoint, logging endpoint that will just save them in your log storage. Very cool, right? But that may make you DDoS yourself, for instance, if you unknowingly suddenly roll out a very buggy page and then the errors start happening. You really can start just smashing your logging endpoint and your application with it as well, in case it's not separated, and in case there's no, let's say, debouncing mechanism to send the logs and so on and so forth. So it can be tricky. That's though no reason not to do this. Now, another thing that we definitely should log is infrastructure level errors. In case your infrastructure is airing out, you definitely need to know about this. That definitely is relevant for anything, for web servers, job schedulers, message buses, and real-time process supervisors, anything, literally anything that you can potentially think of, any component of your system. And on top of that, your infrastructure is also producing logs, not like errors, but just information. And this information is also important usually. So you do not want to miss that, because there can be warnings about something being deprecated soon. There can be warnings about something I don't know, silently failing to do some stuff that this component doesn't consider crucial, but you do, right? So that also should be logged. With that, you would log everything that you should log. And then the third checklist will tell you, are you logging all you can? Now here, the answer is usually probably not, because there's a lot you can log, and yeah, it may take forever to set up this logging for everything. But in case you want to add more stuff and need ideas, consider adding more of, for instance, custom application errors. This is very easy. This is the same kind of execution error, but something that you trigger yourself. For instance, some algorithm in your code cannot proceed because of some unmet expectations and so on. And then you can error out with a nice message, nice context and everything. And yeah, this will be recorded, and this will bring value definitely. So that is one of the most valuable things. Now you can add logs about important application events. What that means can be approached from two different perspectives: from the business perspective and from the perspective of like the tech part. So yeah, let's approach it from the tech perspective. For instance, we can log the start, success, and failure events of key operations. Like if you're processing a message from your message bus, then there is a start for this operation, and then there's a success or a failure for this operation. You would most likely to know about that, because that is valuable information in many cases. Also, not once I had a problem for instance, scheduled jobs like cron jobs not running silently because someone, me in many cases, actually broke the cron configuration, and then it just errored out silently with one line, and it's not running. And the way I always was learning about this was, okay, something else isn't working, and then I need to go investigate why, and then I get to jobs haven't run. That's because I didn't have any information about whether they run at the moment or not. So yeah, startup and finish, or start, success, and failure, again, for those would be also important application events from the tech perspective. There are also some, let's say, business important application events, like there was an order or something like that. But normally, a business already knows about this, either from your database or from your Google Analytics or from some sources like that. So it doesn't have to be in the logs, but it can. Now, there can be unimportant application events that you would like to know about, not always, but maybe in some cases. So if you would like to know about them always, then just put info level logs for that. Logging doesn't hurt, and you can add info logs about literally anything, and then build, dashboards on top of that and so on. Then you can add debug level logs. Moreover, there are debug level logs from many of the components. If we toggle the debug mode on, stuff starts producing many more logs, because we need this verbosity to investigate something more in depth, right? So you can define your own debug level or info level logs. You can also log the ones that are already produced for you by the components of your system. So, but that is also something that needs to land in the very same log storage and have all the same attributes that we discussed in the first checklist. Okay, you have all that. Well, great job then. Are there any next steps to that? Yes, there are. And the next steps are, first of all, log-derived alerts. Now that you have that much data, you can do a lot with it, right? And one of the first things that come to mind is actually getting alerted when there are logs of certain kind, or there are no logs of certain kind. So you just define these patterns of unusual behavior. You set up a small application that would query your logs at schedule, as often as possible, of course, depending on how many queries per time unit your log storage can handle. And then if there are logs or there are no logs, so there's unusual behavior, it would alert you. So it would send a message over Slack, email, Discord, SMS. It can even call you with this robotic voice and say your website is down. So depending on how far you would like to go with this. There are also tools for that as well, of course. Now you can add log tracing. That is some additional dimension you would add for your logs. So you would just then tag your logs with some certain tags, and these tags would attribute the logs to certain trace session. So trace sessions are like virtually anything, but normally they are like web sessions, some, let's say, if you're running microservices, then some call tree of your front end that accepts the first request from your customer, and then in the background it calls all of your microservices, and that call tree can also be your trace session and can have a certain trace session ID. Now, a scheduled job run can be one as well, and also, I don't know, processing a message from a message bus can be also a trace session. Anything can be. So that gives you a broader overview. Whenever an issue happens, then you can literally see what happened, like one by one, like in a sequence, and that gives you more insights in many cases. So that would be for starters. There's much more probably that we could come up with, but that's the main stuff. But even though there's one question that's maybe already bugging you, and let's address it. So you might think that, wait, that's a lot of work, really a lot of work to set up. Is it even worth it? My answer is, of course, yes, because you get benefits for it. The first benefit, and one of the biggest probably, but you decide, is ease of dealing with bugs. So when there is a live bug and you need to fix it, you have all the logs. They are very easily reachable, super readable, and very informative. You can find the root cause of the issue in no time in many cases, hopefully in most of the cases. Yeah, that gives you more, let's say, more time for everything else, right? Now, in case you have alerting set up, you can react to issues before they get reported by anyone. And there's nothing like getting a call from one of the business guys who is panicking and saying, everything is down, the website is down. And then you go, no, actually, when the website isn't down, it's just this fraction of the website that doesn't work properly. And we know what the issue is. We're already on it. The fix will be deployed soon. And through that, they actually understand that you know what you're doing. And that builds trust. Now you get confidence estimating your scopes of the sprints, projects, and committing to deadlines, because you know that those disruptions that the live issues may create actually won't be that drastic. That is why they won't influence your deadlines that much, and you don't need to, I don't know, bump the deadline up to like the double of what you thought to actually accommodate the unexpected issues, right? Combined, this all combined gives you eventually less stress, because there's less stress coming from bugs, less stress coming from bug reports, and less stress committing to deadlines. Less stress overall. That is cool, isn't it? We don't want more stress at work, do we? And on top of that, there's also a lot of data in your logs and for real-time dashboards. Now, not only you can just display nice graphs and have some, some screen, some additional big, nice screen in your room, but also this can give you more insights about the issues that are happening. For instance, such a normal thing as, let's say, getting 404 or like giving 404 responses can highlight many things. For instance, a broken link published on the website if there is a spike in the 404 responses that you are looking at, right? or some I don't know, some person is trying to scan your website for some certain admin URLs or something like that, so a potential security alert. So that can also be cool to look at. And also a lot of stuff for PMs and for business to look at in the logs, in case you are producing the logs for them as well. Cool. I mentioned that we're up for it. There's one more question that still is to be addressed. Can it be that we log too much doing all that? Because that does look like a lot of logs. And the answer is yes. If it affects your app performance, in general, it should not affect your app performance because logging should be a very tiny operation, preferably as much asynchronous as possible. But in case it does, I would suggest to look into how you're logging. As a mitigating strategy, you could reduce the I/O to whatever log storage you have by, I don't know, logging every 200 logs, like in bulks. So actually writing every 200 logs. But yeah, that's just an immediate thing. It still needs to be checked because generally it should not affect your app performance all that much. Now, you can log too much if you can't afford to store that much data that you're producing. In that case, you definitely can look at the logs depth that you have. So basically how many days of logs you keep. For most of the applications, it does not make sense to keep more than, I don't know, 1-2 months of logs or something. 3 months, it really depends, especially for staging environments. There we can maybe settle for, I don't know, a week or two. However, in some cases, especially if the issue reporting cycle of the issues that you're getting is longer, for instance, it somehow takes 6 months to actually get an issue reported, then you might need the log depth to be increased there, and maybe you may even need to keep it forever. In that case, I suggest that you just dump everything that is older than X months to some cheaper storage. So cloud providers do provide different types of storage usually, which is much cheaper to store stuff there, and much more expensive to read stuff from there, but you won't need to read from there very often. So that is actually a good thing. And by the way, not having logs can also cost you money. So it's nice to remember that this is a trade-off. So like how much money you spend for storing logs versus how much money you would lose in case of issues if there is no log to help you. And now you can log too much if you're putting sensitive data in your logs, right? So then one log can be too much if this log contains a password, because passwords are not for storing them unencrypted. Preferably they should be encrypted just with one-way encryption, of course. So, generally consider filtering what you're logging, and consider also treating your log storage the same way as, pretty much the same way as your DB, right? Securely, carefully restrict access to this and so on. Now, unless these 3 points, no, you can't log too much. Log everything you can. I can sum it up in one slide with the help of Robot Bender. Downtime is expensive. Storage for logs is cheap. Storage nowadays is cheap. So invest in storage. Don't try to invest in having less downtime, zero downtime. Less downtime probably, but zero downtime. If you have a recipe for this, please let me know. Yeah, I would also like to know how to have zero downtime. Then we don't need logs maybe. Good. Now that can all sound a little too cumbersome to build on our own, and that is. So there is tooling for that, for all that. So yeah, you can see the logos of the tools that I could recall. Yeah, I'll just list them out for you. The first one, and probably the most popular one, at least from my experience, is the ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Yeah, you can have it on your own, run it on your own, but that will incur some maintenance cost. You can have it managed for you. Logs.io is one of the options. I believe there are more of those. Now there's Sentry, also a very well-known name in this, and the log management area. And there are also solutions from New Relic and Datadog and probably other stuff, right? So they all have different pricing strategies and so on and so forth. So just go check out for yourself what fits. Now that's it from me for the logging for today. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, I will post those checklists that I mentioned on Twitter. So if you're interested, go ahead and follow me. And in case you have questions, now please shoot. Are there any questions? Let me quickly check. Yeah, should application already log in JSON or in info human readable format? It depends. If we're talking about an application that is logging in JSON, then we probably need some parsing mechanism there, right? So we need to parse this JSON into a human readable format when we're displaying the logs. But in terms of the storage, we can definitely store them in a JSON format.
Justinas is asking, how often would you advise logging inside methods? For example, we log web requests before and after. However, what about what happens inside the methods that the controller calls?
That's exactly the kind of question I'm also always asking myself when I'm thinking of the design for the logs that I would like to create there. So my suggestion would be that you see what methods you really value, and then put the logs about some significant actions in those. You start with that, and then you can add in terms of priority more and more and more, depending on how much you can afford. So whenever it starts affecting your performance still, despite of everything you do to optimize, then yeah, then maybe you can reduce already, but I have never reached that state.
And Anton, problem, so I'm not sure if you answered to the question if the slides will be available.
Oh yes, the slides will be available definitely. I can publish the slides themselves, but I also the checklists for the logs separately on Twitter, so go ahead and follow me to see the link when it's published. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your attention. Cheers.